In April 2002, Sergei Karjakin scored his second Grandmaster norm at the age of just 12 years and 3 months. And this followed hot on the heels of his first Grandmaster norm scored 2 months earlier. This tournament, the Alushta tournament of 2002, he played against, now how am I going to say his name? Karjakin S Arzumanian, rated 2461. And this was one of the wins that helped him along the way in order to score that second Grandmaster norm. How did he do it? Well, one of the big pieces of advice I give to young players, not immediately when they start, but when they take their first steps in chess, is get your king castled. It sounds such an important, well, such a basic move to say, basic idea to tell everyone, but you wouldn't believe how many people don't actually do it. Now, of course, there are rules there to be broken, but in this game we're going to see Black, who is Karjakin's opponent, take a lot of liberties and not castle, and he gets completely crushed within 20 moves. Let's see how Karjakin managed to do that. So he started with his typical move e4. I think throughout his career, Karjakin has always played e4, and I think he likes these tactical, sharp openings. And instead of playing the open Sicilian, which is characterized by d4, possibly because he was concerned with some preparation on the Shreshnikov or the Kalashnikov, he decided to play the Rossolimo with bishop b5, and his opponent replied with e6, and he took the knight on c6. So this immediately gives Black these double pawns on c6 and c5. Not terrible, of course, and in fact, after his move b3, if we fast forward 10 years to 2012, you may have realised that this opening, this line with b3 on move 5, was played by Vishy Anand in his match against Boris Gelfand for the world title. So possibly he was motivated by Karjakin's win in this game. We will never know. Now, this idea of b3 is quite well motivated. The point is that Black's bishop on f8 needs to develop at some point, and it wants to go to somewhere like e7. But if we get to play bishop b2, how is Black going to deal with that idea? Because if Black were to play something like the routine move knight f6, he might run into e5. Now, this leads to all kind of positional problems, which I'm going to show in just a second. I mean, let's actually show that now. I mean, for example, if I play knight f6 straight away, e5, knight d5, the problem for Black is eventually White is going to be able to try and target that pawn. Anyone who knows these kind of Nimzo Indian structures for Black will know that White will play something like, if I'm just showing moves here now. This idea of knight c3 to a4, and then bishop a3 to target the pawn. So that's an example of the pitfalls that Black could or should try to avoid in this variation. And I think for people who want to play a safe line and avoid the sharp lines of the Shreshnikov, the bishop b5 line is well worth a look at. In my humble view, I think players should play the open Sicilian, but this is one of the decent anti-Sicilians around, and we're going to see that to great effect by Karjakin in this game. So, in this position b3, Black played f6. Now that's attempting to cut across that plan of e5 we just spoke about. But what it does is, we're going to ask the question, what is Black going to do with these pieces? I mean, yes, the bishop can go to e7. What about the knight on g8? Well, it can do this idea, and it leaves Black a little bit passive, but I still think this is playable. It's just f6 feels a little bit, I don't know how to say, risky, or if Black's got to play move like f6, has he really chosen the right opening? We're not sure about. But generally, White can be quite happy. White's going to play very sensible moves like castling and developing like this, knight h6. Now, we just spoke about this positional idea of targeting these pawns. So White could, of course, play c4 and blockade them. But Karjakin noticed a different kind of characteristic in this position, which is Black's a little bit behind in development. I mean, we've already castled and they haven't got anywhere close. So he decided that we're going to try and open up the position. He now played d4. Well, this immediately puts pressure on Black, because if Black were to now capture on d4, bishop takes h6 and knight takes d4, and suddenly queen h5 check is a huge threat. And it's all because black has played moves like f6 and knight h6, not really controlling the centre. So d4 was quite a good move. Now, of course, black doesn't have to allow that, and he played knight f7. But what this allows now for white to do is to hit that pawn on c5. And what's going to happen here is black now has to make a decision about that pawn. Could we go d6? Well, that's just very weak, because now white gets to give black double pawns. And we've already talked about how white's going to try and win that. Pawn c4, knight c3, and knight a4. Quite simple chess, but very effective chess at the same time. So after bishop a3, Arzumanian he captured on d4, but this now allowed white to stop black castling. Well, it's not completely disastrous at this moment, because black has quite a strong shield around his king. These pawns are doing a good blockading role. But after queen takes d4, I feel that this kind of position is much easier for white to play. And the reason why is white's moves can just sort of roll off the tongue. Knight c3, rook ad1, rook fe1. Whereas black's moves all feel a little bit unnatural. I mean, how are we going to sort our king out, for example? What are we going to do about this rook on h8? What about the bishop on c8? Yes, it can come to a6, which is going to happen quite soon. But white, of course, can play c4 as well to block the bishop out. So it's not really clear what black's strategy is in this position. And that's probably one of the reasons why this opening can be quite effective for white. White doesn't do anything unnatural, just plays developing moves towards the centre. And yet we see the great effectiveness of this line. So, e5. Well, black decides, if you're not going to go for the centre, then I will. Is it going to be that strong? I think if we imagine that black's king had actually castled in this position, you'd probably just say it's better for black. But the problem with playing without a rook is at any moment the position gets opened up, that king on f8 is going to look a little bit under threat, and we're going to see that actually occur in the game. Not at the moment, because black has a lot of central control, but as the sort of forces collide with each other and we get the tactical melee that will occur in this middle game, I think it's going to become much more apparent then. So, rook d1, another sensible move. Trying to attack this pawn on d5, so black played f5. Well, not quite sure about that move. Maybe bishop e6 was better. Maybe then knight c3, d4, knight a4. We saw this idea before. And white can start attacking these central pawns here. I really don't like black's position. Again, the king on f8. What are we going to do about that? So, Arzumanian decided, well, let's play for tactics f5. Now, the point about that move is that if we take on d5, can you spot the idea for black? It is to play e4. And now, it is black who is winning a piece and with a better position. So, f5. And I really liked Karjakin's next move, because it's one of those moves that I don't think black had actually envisaged, but it puts annoying pressure on black's position. And that was queen c3. Now, I just spoke about how white's moves are probably going to be quite natural moves. And then suddenly he plays queen c3 and blockades the knight's best square, which is knight to c3. But at the same time, and we've seen this happen from Karjakin quite a lot, he's very good at changing his mind or being very flexible with his opening and with his plans in the middle game. So whilst he may have considered c4 or knight c3 ideas, now black has played f5. He realises his position has completely changed, and black now needs to be very careful about how he's going to defend these pawns. In fact, black really has one good move, which is what he played, queen to d6. But now, the knight just came to d2. Very strong. There's a big threat in this position, actually, which is to play knight c4 at some moment and utilise the pin down towards the queen on d6. All very simple chess, but yet very effective chess. I think even after d4, he might have just played knight c4 here. That looks quite strong. And black is going to be under a lot of pressure on these squares. Coupled again, as we've always spoken about, what are these pieces doing here on the king side? So, bishop e6. Now, we could have played knight c4, but instead queen a5 was played. What does the queen do on a5? Moving the queen yet again, but what we're trying to do is potentially unleash the c-pawn, but also allow white's knight to come to c4 as well. The same tactic can be said if black had taken on e4 now as on the previous move. The point was to play knight takes e4 and use the rook towards the black queen. So all in all, black would have to move the queen again, whereas black's development, well, it's not really coming, is it? And that was the main problem for black in this game. In fact, black did take on e4 there, but after queen e7, he still hoped that the central pawns were quite strong. How do you think you would assess this position? It's one of those positions where even quite strong players could get wrong for either colour. I think black was quite satisfied. Maybe he was trying to play for a win against Karjakin. And he thought, well, yes, I have this bad king, but those central pawns will outweigh anything that white can throw at me. Another thing is, if white played something like knight c5, which is what most people would play, I mean, the knight reaches a lovely square on c5. But what it allows is for black to play bishop g4. And maybe black has some chances on white's king side, because all of white's pieces have reached the queen side. So, Karjakin decided to go knight d2. And g5, well, chances to attack, bring the king to g7. But look how quickly black's position falls apart. Rook e1, simply attacking the pawn on e5. Bishop d7, queen c7. Again, how does black defend that? He had to go e4, but knight d4. And all the time, black is unable to play king g7 because all of these pieces are being attacked. So, c5, knight e2. Now, last chance probably king g7, but I think these pawns like this are a little bit weak, and white can do something like knight g3. Big threat in this position. If black does something like rook c8, can you see the winning idea for white in this position? Knight f5 check. Very effective, and here we see the drawback of black's poorly placed pieces. Bishop cannot take because the queen is hanging. And if black goes king f6, well, there are many moves here white could do, but I really like knight takes e7 and knight takes d5 check, winning the rook on c7. It's a very simple play from white. So black decided in this position not to play king g7, but really go for it. But Karjakin had it all worked out. Yes, black can take the knight, queen takes d7, rook e8, and a very simple idea here. I mean, we spoke about black's king. He's completely forgotten about his own king. Rook f1, and it's game over. Because after rook e7, queen d8 check, and here black resigned because if rook e8, queen comes to f6, and there is a threat of mate on f7, and if rook e7, hopefully you can see the winning idea, queen takes h8 checkmate. So, again, a hallmark of Karjakin's play, very sensible chess, developing castling. He does this even now in his games. He's a good role model, I think, for young players to aspire to in that respect, because he doesn't do anything fancy. He just develops his pieces, and here black was punished for his neglectful play. So there was Karjakin securing his second Grandmaster norm at the Alushta tournament in 2002 at the age of just 12 years and 3 months.